And that's the reason why the so-called black man has to get himself together so that he can correct his woman. And if we have that mentality, that mindset, you watch the trickle-down effect. What the so-called black man is being convinced of is that he has to be a social activist. He has to grab up bullhorns and stand on top of cars and call attention to himself and talk about the system. No, the greatest way that you could rebel against a quote-unquote oppressive system is to take control over your household. And if every so-called black man does that or did that, and then on top of that, embrace a culture based in a code of ethics that would be productive as opposed to destructive, then there's nothing that could stop us. But the first thing that the so-called black man has to do is correct himself. We have to correct ourselves. But we do have to understand the so-called black woman and how she's been programmed. Because to be quite frank with you, most of them are not going to make it. They're too far gone. It's like a virus that has permeated every aspect of their DNA, every organelle in their DNA structure has been plagued by this disease known as feminism, i.e. Luciferianism, i.e. mother goddess worship. Very difficult for them. Very, very difficult for them to overcome that level of programming. At the end of the day, brothers, we have to operate on a higher level. Don't get it twisted. I understand that the so-called black woman, for the most part, is liberal. And the liberal black female is basically like a real-life zombie. She's a person who has decided to absorb or take in a lot of self-defeating and self-destructive ideologies. They permeate her. They permeate the so-called black community. One of the main ideologies that the liberal black female has embraced is feminism. As a matter of fact, that is her main altar. As I've been explaining to so many of you brothers that frequent my channel almost since the inception of my channel, the three main altars of the modern liberal female, but particularly the so-called liberal black female, because my channel is geared towards the so-called black man, is that number one, she's a globalist, meaning she loves everyone, or at least alleges to. She wants to hold hands with everyone. The so-called liberal black female is always claiming to have knowledge of various movements and revolutions and things of that nature because she loves to appear cultured and to have an understanding of what's going on all across the world, when oftentimes she does not even grasp what's going on in her own life. The second altar of the liberal black female is the racialist altar, meaning what? She loves to talk about race issues. Oftentimes she'll depict herself as being quote-unquote pro-black, when in reality, the racialist altar is normally just used to garner attention for herself and to take attention away from the so-called black man, who's the true target of most racism in this society and in any society where we have that racism dynamic. Why is that? Because the man is the threat. The woman is not the threat. The woman will never be the threat. In all reality, the woman is viewed as being a part of the spoil. When I say spoil, I mean the riches. When you conquer a country, when you conquer a nation, you kill the men and you take the women as spoil, as concubines, sex slaves, whatever you want to call them. So the black woman will never be a threat, ever. As a matter of fact, the only time that she's viewed as a threat is when she shows loyalty and fidelity to the so-called black man. Then that becomes a problem. And the third altar, which is by far her strongest altar, is the feminist altar, which is where she gets to venerate herself as the mother goddess. This is where we get the ideology that currently is making its way through the so-called black community, especially the woke contingent of the so-called black community, of the black woman being quote-unquote God. For those of you brothers who remember, back in the 80s and early 90s, that's when they started calling the so-called black woman a queen. Then it was, she's a goddess. Now it's, she's a god. For the most part, that philosophy is initiated and propagated by fatherless Negroes. It's normally so-called black men with no father that want to push that ideology about the so-called black woman being God. The so-called black woman is beautiful. All women, for the most part, are beautiful when they're in their right mind, but particularly the so-called black woman, when she's in her right mind, is beautiful. But most of them are not in their right mind. And that's the reason why the so-called black man has to get himself together so that he can correct his woman. And if we have that mentality, that mindset, you watch the trickle-down effect.